Grand Admiral Kessarenthal had conquered 41 worlds without losing a single fleet, and he had done it by following one unbreakable rule: study the prey before you strike. For 6 years, the Velcarax Dominion had watched humanity from the shadows of the Outer Rim, cataloging every transmission, every satellite, every clumsy attempt at interstellar communication. Their conclusion, delivered to the Dominion's High Council in a report that would later become infamous across the galaxy, was simple and absolute. Species designation, human. Threat classification, negligible. Humans built ships that moved at a fraction of light speed. Their weapons were crude explosives and kinetic projectiles. Their governments argued with each other constantly, unable to agree on anything, let alone a unified defense strategy. To the Dominion, Earth was not a threat. It was a resource, fertile, populated, and hopelessly unprepared for what was coming. They will surrender within 6 hours of first contact, Kessarin told his officers aboard the Velthari, a warship the size of a small moon, its hull the color of a starless sky. Primitive species always do, once they understand resistance is mathematically pointless. His science officer, a quiet Velcarax named Ushrel, had spent more time than most studying humanity's strange, chaotic culture, and something about the Admiral's confidence unsettled her. Admiral, their history suggests otherwise. This is a species that has fought itself for 10,000 years and never once stopped rebuilding. Fighting each other is not the same as fighting us, Kessarin said, dismissing her with the ease of a man who had never once proven wrong. Prepare the fleet. We make contact at Earth in 48 hours. 400 light-years away, in a research facility buried beneath the mountains of Colorado, Dr. Maya Okafor was staring at a problem that made absolutely no sense. Every deep space listening array on the planet had gone quiet in the exact same instant. Not broken, not malfunctioning, simply quiet, as though something had reached out across the void and gently placed a hand over humanity's ears. Maya had spent 11 years designing early warning systems for Human Defense Command, systems built specifically to detect exactly this kind of anomaly. And none of them had a category for what she was looking at now. Run it again, she told her team, though she already knew diagnostics would return the same answer. Every array. Simultaneously. That doesn't happen by accident. It didn't. At 0347 Mountain Time, General Aris Voss, Human Defense Command's ranking officer for the Western Hemisphere, and the only person in the building who still looked calm, walked into the control room holding a data slate that made even his composed expression falter. We have a fleet, he said. Confirmed multiple contacts entering the outer solar system. Configuration doesn't match anything in our threat library. Maya felt her stomach drop. Humanity had spent the last 30 years quietly preparing for exactly this moment. Ever since the first confirmed alien signal had been intercepted by accident during a routine satellite calibration. A discovery so carefully classified that less than 1,000 people on the entire planet knew the truth. Earth was not alone, and had not been alone for a very long time. How many ships? She asked. 12. But Maya, that's not the concerning part. He set the slate down in front of her, and Maya's blood ran cold as she read the ship classifications as her own analysts had flagged in red. 12 vessels, each one larger than anything humanity had ever built, arranged in a formation that wasn't random. It was a formation built for total planetary blockade. The kind of overwhelming force you only deployed against an enemy you expected to fight back. They don't think we're primitive, Maya said slowly, staring at the deployment pattern. Or they wouldn't need 12 warships to say hello. Voss's jaw tightened. Get command online. Full alert, every base, every ship. And Maya, activate Directive 12. Maya's hands went still on the console. Directive 12 had a name inside Human Defense Command that only the most senior officers were authorized to use. A protocol specifically for the day the galaxy finally noticed Earth existed. They called it Protocol. And somewhere in low Earth orbit, exactly as General Voss gave the order, every human signal on the planet, every broadcast, every satellite ping, every trace of electromagnetic noise humanity had ever produced, stopped. All at once. Completely Admiral Kessarenthal stood on the command deck of the Velthari as Earth grew from a pale dot to a blue-white sphere on the main viewport. and for the first time in 6 years of surveillance, something about the planet felt wrong. "Report," he said. Ushral's antennae twitched, a Velcarax tell for genuine unease. "Admiral, all human electromagnetic activity ceased at the moment we crossed the outer brief field. Every transmission, every satellite, every signal this species has broadcast for over a century, gone, within the same second." Kesserin frowned. In 6 years of study, humanity had never demonstrated the coordination to agree on a border dispute, let alone execute a planet-wide communications blackout with perfect synchronization. Equipment failure? Unlikely across that many independent systems simultaneously, Ushral said. "Admiral, I don't believe this is failure. I believe it's discipline." The word hung uncomfortably on the bridge. Discipline was not a trait the Dominion's intelligence reports had ever assigned to humanity. Chaos, certainly. Aggression, frequently. But discipline implied planning, and planning implied that somewhere, someone on that small, primitive world had known this day was coming. "Continue the approach," Kesserin said, refusing to let doubt slow a campaign he had already reported as certain victory to the High Council. "Deploy the Herald signal. Standard first contact protocol. Give them the opportunity to surrender before we're forced to demonstrate why surrender is the correct choice." The Herald signal went out across every frequency the Dominion's translators could generate, a calm, overwhelming voice designed to make lesser species understand the futility of resistance before a single weapon was fired. "People of Earth, you are addressed by the Velcarax Dominion. Your world has been evaluated and classified. Resistance will result in unnecessary casualties. Submit your coordinates for surrender terms within 6 hours, or your planet will be brought into compliance by force." Answered. Not the silence of a species too frightened to respond. The silence of a species that had chosen, deliberately, not to. 400 kilometers below, inside the reinforced command bunker beneath the Rocky Mountains, Maya Okafor watched the Herald signal decode across a dozen screens and felt something colder than fear settle into her chest. A strange, sharpencus that came from finally facing the thing you'd spent your entire career preparing for. "They're not wrong to be confident," General Voss said quietly, standing beside her. 12 capital ships. Our entire orbital defense network combined couldn't scratch the paint on one of them in a straight fight. "Then we don't give them a straight fight," Maya said. Voss allowed himself the faintest, grim smile. Directive 12 was built for exactly this moment. "But Maya, once we commit to this, there's no walking it back. If it fails, Earth knows second plan." Maya thought of the 30 years of quiet, desperate preparation that had led this exact second. Scientists working in secret, and tired of human defense command hidden behind classified budgets and cover stories, an entire planet's worth of contingency built in the shadow of a threat most of humanity didn't even know was real. She thought of every argument she'd had with skeptical officials who thought the program was paranoid, wasteful, unnecessary. "It won't fail," she said, though she wasn't entirely certain she believed it. "Authorize it." Voss keyed his comm, and across the planet, in facilities buried beneath deserts, oceans, and mountain ranges that the Velcarax Dominion survey teams had cataloged as nothing more than geological curiosities, something enormous began, very quietly, to wake up. Aboard the Velthari, Kesserin watched the countdown to humanity's surrender deadline tick past its first hour with mounting irritation. "Scan the surface. I want to know exactly what a primitive species does when it's frightened into silence." Ushral's readouts flickered, resolved, and then flickered again, as though the instruments themselves didn't trust what they were showing her. "Admiral," she said slowly, "I'm reading heat signatures. Massive ones. Directly beneath locations our survey classified as uninhabited terrain decades ago." "Define massive." Ushral turned from her console, and for the first time in 6 years of serving under Kesserin Thal, her voice carried something the Admiral had never heard from her before. "Fear." "Admiral, whatever they've been building down there, it's the size of our fleet. And it's not one facility. Our scans are now confirming 7 separate locations, all across the planet, all active, all powering up in the same instant. On the viewport, Earth continued turning peacefully beneath them, blue and silent, giving away nothing. While beneath its surface, humanity's best-kept secret finally opened its eyes. Part 3. The first of the 17 facilities broke the surface of the Pacific Ocean 40 kilometers off the coast of what had once been called Guam, and Ushrill's sensors nearly failed trying to process what rose out of the water. It wasn't a ship, not in any configuration the Dominion's classification systems recognized. It was a structure, vast, angular, humming with an energy signature that didn't match any known drive system, water sheeting off a hole the color of deep oceans, running with lights that pulsed in slow, deliberate patterns like something breathing after a long sleep. Admiral, Ushrill said, that facility alone is larger than 3 of our capital ships combined, and it is not the largest of the 17. Kesserin stared at the viewport, his earlier confidence cracking for the first time since the campaign began. Human intelligence reports classified the species as incapable of coordinated megastructure engineering. Explain the discrepancy. I believe, Ushrill said carefully, that the discrepancy exists because every report we compiled was based on what humanity chose to let us see. Inside the mountain bunker, Maya watched the same structures rising across a dozen screens, her hands steady now in a way they hadn't been an hour earlier. 30 years of secrecy, 30 years of misdirection carefully fed into every intercepted signal, every satellite image, every scrap of intelligence humanity suspected alien observers might be collecting. All of it built toward this single moment. Talk to me, Maya, General Voss said. Is the Aegis array going to hold? It's not designed to hold, Maya said. It's designed to answer a question the Dominion hasn't thought to ask yet. On the Velthari, that question arrived less than 10 minutes later, in the form of a single, precise energy pulse fired not at the Dominion fleet, but between 2 of its capital ships, close enough to demonstrate accuracy, far enough to avoid triggering immediate full-scale retaliation. A warning shot, aimed with a level of precision Kesserin's own weapons officers openly admitted they couldn't have matched. They're not attacking, Ushrill said, stunned. They're negotiating. Kesserin's claws tightened against his command chair. In 6 years of surveillance, in 41 previous conquests across a dozen star systems, no species facing the Dominion's fleet had ever responded to a surrender ultimatum with a demonstration of restraint. Fear demanded either submission or panic. This, neither. Open a channel, Kesserin said, his voice tight. Human representative, now. Maya Okafor's voice, calm and measured despite the tremor she refused to let reach her tone, filled the bridge of the Velthari moments later. Admiral Kesserin Thal, she said, and the Dominion's translators noted with quiet alarm that she pronounced his name and rank correctly on the first attempt, a detail their intelligence had insisted was impossible for a species with no prior contact record. You gave humanity 6 hours to consider surrender. We'd like to offer a counterproposal. Withdraw your fleet from Earth orbit, and we'll consider forgetting this conversation ever happened. Laughter would have been the Velkarak's response to such an absurd statement 6 years ago. Now, staring at 17 structures the size of small cities rising from every ocean and continent on a planet his own reports had called negligible, Kesserin found he couldn't manage it. You have no fleet capable of enforcing that threat, he said instead. We don't need a fleet, Maya replied. We need you to understand something your reports got wrong from the very beginning. You've spent 6 years studying what humanity broadcasts. You've never once studied what we build in silence. The channel cut, and in the sudden quiet that followed, Ushrill turned to her admiral with an expression the Velkaraks rarely showed their commanding officers, open, unmistakable doubt. Admiral, I recommend we reconsider our approach. Kesserin said nothing for a long moment, watching the 17 structure continue their slow, patient rise across the planet below, each one now beginning to align in a formation that Ushrill's tactical systems were struggling to categorize as anything other than what it obviously was. Not defense grid. A trap already sprung, waiting only for the Dominion to finish walking into it. Belay the surrender ultimatum, Kesserin finally said, his voice quieter than it had been in years. Full tactical alert, and Ushrill, pull every record we have on human history, every war, every conflict, every moment this species has faced annihilation and refused to accept it. Admiral, that's several thousand years of data. Then we'd better start immediately, Kesserin said, staring down at a world he had called primitive 6 hours earlier, and understanding now, with the first real dread he'd felt in decades of conquest, exactly how badly he had misjudged it. Because I no longer believe we understand what we're actually facing. Part 4. The order to pull humanity's entire war record reached Ushral's console just as the 17 structure completed their alignment, and what she saw in that formation made her forget, for a moment, to breathe. They weren't defensive positions. They were nodes, 17 individual pieces of a single, planet-spanning system, each one now pulsing in perfect synchronization, building toward a purpose the Dominion sensors couldn't yet identify. Admiral, whatever this is, it isn't finished activating, Ushral said. I'm reading a 14% power increase every 90 seconds. If this trend continues, time until full capacity, Kesserin cut in. Elid. Minutes. Kesserin had commanded the Velthari through 41 campaigns, and in every one of them, the deciding factor had been simple. Strike first, strike hard, and let overwhelming force settle any doubt before the enemy could organize a response. Every instinct honed across 2 centuries of service told him to open fire immediately, to burn the 17 structures out of existence before whatever they were building could finish. But he thought of Maya Okafor's voice, calm and precise, correctly pronouncing his name on a first contact that should have been impossible to prepare for. He thought of 30 years of silence hiding technology his own intelligence division insisted didn't exist. And for the first time since taking command, Kesserin Thal hesitated. Ushral. If we strike now, what's our probability of neutralizing all 17 structures before completion? 62%, Admiral, assuming no unknown countermeasures. And if even one structure survives. Ushral didn't answer immediately, and her silence told him everything her instruments couldn't yet calculate. Beneath the mountain, Maya watched the Dominion fleet's weapon signatures begin charging across her tactical display and felt her pulse spike for the first time since the crisis began. Voss, they're preparing to fire. Then we're out of time to be subtle, Voss said. Authorize full activation of the Aegis array. Maya's hand hovered over the final command, the one that would commit humanity irreversibly to a confrontation 30 years in the making. She thought of every classified budget hearing, every skeptical senator who'd called the program a paranoid waste of resources, every scientist who'd spent a career building something they prayed would never actually need to be used. Full activation, she confirmed, and pressed her palm to the console. Across the planet, all 17 structures fired at once, not weapons, not in the way the Dominion sense expected, but a single, coordinated pulse of energy that swept upward through Earth's atmosphere and wrapped itself around the entire planet like held breath finally released, forming a shimmering, near-invisible lattice between Earth and the Dominion fleet. Admiral, my scanners can't penetrate it, Ushral said, alarm sharpening her voice. It's not a shield in any configuration we've cataloged. It's rewriting local spacetime around the planet's gravitational well. Our weapons targeting systems are returning impossible coordinates. Kesserin stared at the lattice forming around Earth, understanding with growing horror that this was not a defense built to survive an attack. It was a defense built to make an attack meaningless, technology so far beyond his fleet's frame of reference that his weapons officers were now reporting targeting solutions that simply didn't correspond to any physical reality they understood. Fire anyway, Kesserin ordered, refusing to let 3 seconds of fear undo 2 centuries of discipline. All batteries, maximum yield, concentrated on the nearest structure. The Velthari's main batteries unleashed a barrage that should have vaporized a city, energy weapons capable of cracking a moon in half converging on a single point in the shimmering lattice below. The energy simply bent around the target, redirected along invisible seams in the fabric of space itself, and reappeared here, aimed directly back at the ship that had fired it. Brace, Ushral screamed, but the warning came too late. The returned energy struck the Veltharward shields with a force that sent the entire bridge crew sprawling, alarms screaming across every console, whole integrity dropping by nearly a third in a single impossible instant. Kesserin pulled himself upright, staring at the wreckage of confidence scattered across his own bridge, and understood with absolute, bone-deep certainty that everything the Dominion had ever believed about this primitive species was catastrophically, irreversibly wrong. Ushral, he said, his voice barely steady, signal the retreat. Admiral, Dominion has never retreated from a first contact engagement in recorded history. I'm aware, Kesserin said, watching the lattice around Earth begin, very slowly, to contract, not toward the planet, but outward toward his fleet, like a fist beginning to close. Signal it anyway, immediately. Because if we don't leave in the next 90 seconds, I don't believe we'll be leaving at all. Across the bridge, every officer froze, staring at their admiral, the man who had never ordered a withdrawal in 41 campaigns. Now watching a species he had called negligible 6 hours earlier close a trap around his entire fleet with terrifying, patient precision. Part 5. The retreat order went out across the Dominion fleet, but retreat, Kesserin quickly discovered, was no longer a choice being offered to him. "Admiral, our engines aren't responding," the helm officer called out, panic fraying the edges of his usually disciplined voice. "Something's holding us in place. Not physically. The lattice is interfacing directly with our drive systems." Ushral's readouts confirmed it a heartbeat later. "It's not restraining the fleet, Admiral. It's studying it. Every scan we've run on Earth these past 6 years, they're running the same process on us now, in real time, and they're doing it 1,000 times faster than we ever could." On the planet below, Maya stood in a command bunker watching the lattice's data returns flood across her screens faster than any human analyst could process manually, the Aegis Array's own quantum processing cores translating 12 alien warships worth of engine schematics, weapon specifications, and defensive architecture into readable intelligence in real time. "General, we have full technical profiles on all 12 ships," she said, something like disbelief coloring her voice even now. "Every weapon system, every shield frequency, every structural weak point. 30 years of preparation, and I don't think any of us actually believed the array would work this well." Voss stared at the data cascading across the main display, and for the first time since the crisis began, allowed himself something dangerously close to hope. "Can we disable their fleet completely?" "We could," Maya said slowly. "But General, if we cripple 12 Dominion warships in full view of whatever's watching from their homeworld, we're not ending a conflict today. We're starting a war humanity isn't ready to fight yet." Voss's jaw tightened, the weight of the decision settling visibly onto his shoulders. "Then what's the play?" Maya looked at the tactical display, at the alien fleet held motionless in humanity's grip, for the first time in the species' recorded history, and thought of every argument she'd made over 30 years about what humanity's real advantage would be when this day finally came. Not superior weapons, not overwhelming force. The ability to choose restraint when annihilation was right there for the taking. "We let them go," she said, "but we make sure they understand exactly what they're leaving behind them." Aboard the Velthari, Kesserin felt the grip on his ship loosen with a suddenness that left his crew scrambling to recheck every system twice before trusting the readouts. Engines answered command again. Weapons returned to Dominion control, and on his main viewport, a new transmission request appeared, marked not from a military channel, but from something the ship's translators flagged with unusual precision as a civilian diplomatic frequency. Maya's voice filled the bridge a moment later, calm, measured, carrying none of the triumph Kesserin had braced himself to hear. "Admiral Kesserin Thal, you have full control of your fleet returned to you. We're not detaining you. We're not destroying you. We want you to leave this system and tell your High Council exactly what happened here today." "And what," Kesserin said, forcing steadiness into his own voice, "do you believe happened here today?" "You came expecting a primitive species too weak to resist," Maya said. "Instead, you found one disciplined enough to spend 30 years something powerful enough to end your entire fleet in 90 seconds, and patient enough to choose not to. That should tell you more about what you're facing than any weapon ever could." The channel closed, and Kesserin sat in silence on his bridge for a long moment, staring at the blue planet below. The 17 structures already beginning to power down, the lattice dissolving back into whatever hidden architecture had produced it, leaving Earth looking exactly as unassuming and defenseless as it had 6 hours earlier. "Ushral," he finally said, "log this in the official record, exactly as it happened. Every detail. I want the High Council to understand precisely what mistake we almost made today. Admiral, if I log this accurately, the Council will demand to know why we didn't press the attack the moment we detected the structures. Because pressing the attack would have ended the Dominion fleet in 90 seconds, Kesserin said quietly. And I suspect they let us know that on purpose. As the Dominion fleet began its slow, humbled withdrawal from Earth orbit, Ushril ran one final scan of the planet they were leaving behind, and found something in the data that made her blood run cold all over again. A signature buried deep within the Aegis Array's power core, faint, but unmistakable, matching nothing in humanity's demonstrated technology. A signature that, according to Dominion's oldest and most classified archives, hadn't been seen anywhere in the galaxy for over 10,000 years. "Admiral," she said carefully, "I don't think humanity built all of this alone." Kesserin turned from the viewport, the weight of Ushril's words settling over the bridge like a held breath. "Explain." "The power signature at the core of their array," Ushril said, pulling the readout onto the main display with hands that weren't entirely steady. "It matches archived records from the Threshold Wars, Admiral. Technology attributed to a civilization the Dominion catalogued as extinct 10,000 years ago. The Architects." The name landed on the bridge with the weight of old, half-forgotten fear. Every Velcarax child grew up hearing fragments of the Threshold Wars, a conflict so old it existed mostly as myth, fought against a civilization so advanced that the handful of surviving records described their technology as indistinguishable from natural law. The Dominion's own ancestors had helped bury that history, task force records sealed so deep that Kesserin himself had only ever seen the redacted summary. "You're suggesting Earth has access to architect technology," Kesserin said slowly. "I'm suggesting," Ushril said, "that whatever built the foundation of that array wasn't human. I believe humanity found something, Admiral, inherited it or uncovered it, and spent 30 years learning to build on top of it without ever fully understanding what they'd found." Beneath the mountain, 400 light-years away, Maya Okafor stood in front of a different display entirely. One that had nothing to do with the retreating Dominion fleet, and everything to do with a discovery kept buried even from most of Human Defense Command. 11 years ago, a routine excavation beneath the Antarctic ice had uncovered a structure that predated every known human civilization by thousands of years, buried so deep and so precisely that its discovery had been classified within hours. The Aegis Array hadn't been built from nothing. It had been built around a core humanity didn't create. Reverse-engineered, painstakingly, over a decade of secret research, from technology whose original architects had left absolutely no other trace of themselves anywhere on the planet. "General," Maya said quietly, "we bought Earth time today. But somewhere out there is the answer to who actually built what we've been standing on top of, and I don't think the Dominion's retreat means we're done being noticed." Voss studied her for a long moment. "You think whoever built that structure is still out there?" "I think," Maya said, "the Dominion just discovered we survived contact using technology we didn't invent. And I think that makes humanity a mystery worth investigating, not a threat worth avoiding. That might be more dangerous than the war we almost fought today." Aboard the Velthari, as the Dominion fleet crossed back through the outer debris field and Earth shrank once more to a distant, deceptively peaceful point of light, Kesserin composed the report that would reach the High Council in less than a day. A report, within a single news cycle, spread across every core world of the Dominion and beyond, reshaping how 100 alien civilizations understood the small, blue planet at the edge of known space. He did not write that humanity was weak. He did not write that they were primitive. He wrote, instead, the sentence that would follow humanity across the stars for generations to come, quoted in briefings and warnings and cautious diplomatic overtures from a dozen civilizations who would never again make the same mistake the Velcarax Dominion had made on a quiet morning above Earth. "We came expecting to find a species too primitive to resist us. We found a species patient enough to let us believe that, right up until the moment they chose not to prove us wrong by force. Humanity did not defeat us today. They simply declined to. I do not know what that species is capable of when it stops declining. I am no longer certain any of us do." 600 light-years away, in a facility even Maya Okafor had no clearance to access, a single signal buried deep beneath the Antarctic ice pulsed once, faintly, for the first time in call to action. The Dominion retreated. But this isn't over, it's just beginning. Something ancient is stirring beneath the ice, and Earth's next visitor might not be an empire that underestimates humanity. It might be something that remembers exactly what we are. If this story gave you chills, hit subscribe, because every episode in this universe connects. The Architects, the Aegis Array, Maya Okafor, Admiral Kessler and Thal, they're all part of something much bigger, and it's only going to get more dangerous from here. Drop a comment. What do you think humanity uncovered beneath Antarctica? And should the Dominion be worried, or should we? Hit the bell so you don't miss the next chapter. Humanity's story is just getting started. 10,000 years, as though something ancient, and not remotely human, had just quietly begun to wake up.